good to see everyone here this morning. I appreciate very much. We love that the visitors are here. I want you to come back every opportunity you have. I was talking to Mark and Hannah just a minute ago and discovered that their commute down here is going to be in a car for 14 hours. They're a little bit long, but Hannah lives in Houston. We'll talk later. That's possible, right? And so anyway, and of course too, I met a couple of young men, Fisher and Thorpe, and as I understand it, Thorpe was named after a famous runner, Jim Thorpe, right? And he runs just as fast, right? Don't you? No? He's a little shaky. We need to encourage him some. And it's good to see Ben's kinfolk here. I understand Scott was on the hoof too long. So we need to keep Scott in our prayers. He's had a little struggle. Appreciate everybody being here. I have a couple of PSA announcements, public service announcements here. One is that we have some beautiful flyers back in the foyer and advertising our summer youth series. And as been said before by many who have announced it, the summer youth series is for our youth, but it's for our family, Christian family. And we have been, at the last one I went to, discovered that there was a lot more older folks than younger folks, but it was still a great meeting, and Banks expecting one here in Stephenville coming up. And so we need to expect and be ready for quite a few when they come. But I would be very honored if you would take those flyers. They're very professionally done. They look really nice. They're very suitable for handing out to your friends and people you see when you work, or some bulletin board you know of at your workplace or in the public, and allow people in this community to know. We're going to advertise a little, but we've got that potential to advertise through this flyer. And boy, if you'd pick one up and hand it out, it would be great. And the other thing is, I hate technology. Wait, I've said that before. My phone fritzed this last week. If you tried to call me and didn't get me, it's because my phone died. For some reason, I could call out, but I could not receive calls. There's no telling how many people I've called and said, please call me back. And I'm sure they did, and I didn't get it. But my wife, the brilliant woman she is, said, well, have you tried resetting your phone? Oh, so I turned it off, turned it back on. It works now. I hate technology. But anyway, appreciate everyone being here. If you did try to call me last week, you can call me this week. I hope to get your phone call. We're looking again for the last time, John 9 has just some tremendous lessons to be had. And by the way, every chapter in John is like this. This is the third, for those of you who are visiting, this is the third lesson we've had from John, the 9th chapter. Let me tell you without any hesitation, any one of the chapters you find in John has that and more lessons that can be learned from it. John is a book rich with lessons that apply to us. John was not like the synoptics that were more a history and a chronological era of what Christ did while he was on this planet. John is a generic gospel that speaks about Jesus in general. It's not chronological. It's intended for us to look at and learn the lessons of things that occurred during his life. And that's why when we're in John 9, here is another lesson I think that is phenomenal that we can learn. And I want to preface this with the idea that I believe it's been very difficult for us in our culture to marvel at much of anything. I think part of the reason is because of all of the technology that we are accustomed to and the bombardment of information that comes in on us all the time. Face page, talk tick, and all that other stuff, and I said them wrong on purpose, okay? But nevertheless, the whole point is we have so much at our disposal, and so much of it is shocking and so arresting our attention and phenomenal that all of a sudden I think we've become a bit jaded, maybe a bit numb. Like the old song Pink Floyd sings, we've become comfortably numb. And it's very hard to marvel about anything. In fact, Don Henley, who used to sing for the Eagles, wrote a song one time called Dirty Laundry. And I want to read some of the lyrics because I think he pegged it. This is part of the reason that there's a lot of cynicism when it comes to what we see in our public information system. He says, in the lyrics of the song, talking about news and how we get our news. I don't know whether you're a big fan of some of our news programs here in this country, but I don't watch a lot of news anymore because of the political backdrop to it, the promotion of ideology and things of that nature that seeps through in the news. But anyway, he makes the statement in his song, we got the bubble-headed bleached blonde, comes on at 5, she can tell you about the plane crash with a gleam in her eye. It's interesting when people die, give us dirty laundry. Can we film the operation yet? Next phrase. Can we film the operation yet? Is the head dead yet? You know the boys in the newsroom got a running bet. Get the widow on the set. We need dirty laundry. And I'll tell you what, our world feeds on rubbernecking. As a matter of fact, some years ago I was reading an Ellery Queen book. I don't know why, but anyway, I came across an illustration where his characters in the book were upset because of rubberneckers. You know what I'm talking about. Somebody has an accident, and every bit of traffic slows down. Even across the median on the oncoming traffic, they slow down too. Everybody's got to look, see if they can see any blood and gore. Ellery Queen, in his character, said, why did people do it? Why this herd curiosity about a street, a house, windows, doors? He was a public servant, the inspector mused, but there were times when he could enjoy loading all the rubberneckers onto barges and towing them out to sea to be served with ceremony to sharks. And I thought, that's kind of funny. He's using the same panache, this exotic message to decry and be upset about the exotic message that people are looking for when they rubberneck. We got a culture where I think we're kind of dull when it comes to things marvelous. I really got to hand it to these miracle workers. They really got to pull something off these days for anybody to believe in them, because there's guys that get on stage, magicians, that make elephants disappear and make white tigers. Well, no, the white tiger ate the guy. But anyway, the point being, they have to do phenomenal miracles anymore for anybody to ever give attention to something that really is marvelous. Back in the culture when we're talking about John 4 here, didn't have a lot of this technology situation that we have today. Actually, people still looked at each other in the face and talked to each other in that day and age. And yet when this healing of a blind man, everybody knew he was blind from birth, this healing of a blind man transpired, it could not have been anything less than the buzz of all the community. Everybody was aware of it. We visited that notion last week. Now, why is it that something so marvelous could go unattended to? Not accepted. I mean, that's what the issue was with the leadership here. And of all people, you would expect the leadership to be the ones who get all the details through their research and accept, here's the way it is. And they did not. And so the man says, in verse 30, that Albert read just a moment ago, why this marvelous thing? This is a marvelous thing, that you do not know where he is from, yet he has opened my eyes. Why is it that when such a marvelous thing transpires, you can't see it? And I wonder sometimes if we get kind of dull, and we get kind of apathetic, and maybe for an instance take for granted some of the marvelous things that we live every day. I used to have a property up in Jacksboro when I preached there. A good man, Randy, gave me keys to the place. It was a section of land, 640 acres, upon which not hardly anyone had ever traversed, because he had owned it for years and years and years. And he allowed me to go out there and hunt. I say hunt quotations because I took a firearm, but I rarely, if ever, hunted. In fact, what I did is I was able to get out there and I was able to sit on a rock and watch the sunset in an evening and just be amazed. Marvel at the wonder of God's creation. But, you know, folks from Colorado get to see that when they drive through the majesty of the hills, of course we call them as mountains, the mountain ranges up there, the beauty of what God has created. And you look at everything and you think of Psalm 19, where the psalmist talks about the beauty of creation. How is it that we have lost our ability sometimes to marvel at that? And it makes me wonder doubly because, on TVs, you can now, on devices even, you can watch nature channels. And if you'll ignore all the evolution nonsense, you can get to the idea that there are some beautiful scenes that you can see that I'll never be able to visit. But I can see them on the screen. And why is it that we don't marvel at things like that? David would make the statement, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. We got a doctor in the audience this morning. He could give us details on how incredible this human body is. I've never been so more impressed than I was when I was in Big Spring, Texas, getting my eyeballs fixed. I tell everybody I got plastic eyeballs. That's not exactly true. I've got lenses in my eyes because I got into some kind of chemical in the Navy and went blind. And it was over the course of time, and I really didn't notice it so much that this eye was totally coated over with a film. I couldn't see out of it. This one was 2/3 coated, so I was basically operating off 1/3 of my eye. And I didn't notice it until I pulled into a 2-acre parking lot of the church building. Denny and I had gone out for lunch, and I pulled in, and there is one telephone pole in that parking lot. Yes, indeed. Guess what? Jeff slapped his Dodge pickup right in the back end of it and messed up my pickup. And Denny, I'll never forget the look on his face when he looked at me like, well, you dummy. How do you miss a telephone pole? Well, I couldn't see. So when I went into Big Spring Hospital, there, the Veterans Hospital, they replaced my eyelids, my eyeball, whatever they replaced, the lenses. It was amazing to me when they got them in there how vivid color was. I'd been seeing in pastels for years. But what impressed me even more was the Pakistani doctor that worked on me. And he gave me some advice at the end of the operation as to how to function and take care of my eyes. And he made the statement, it's amazing what we can do, we doctors, with the human body, but we're not as good as God. He said, those lenses ain't going to do as good as the ones God put in there. You need to wear sunglasses. So that's what I do. Anytime I go outside, so that the light doesn't come through those plastic lenses and go to the back of my head and almost put me on my knees with a headache, I wear sunglasses. Got to cut out all those bright rays. But his comment was so well and succinctly stated. Isn't it amazing what God can do? How fearfully and wonderfully we are made. I think sometimes we get dull to the sense of how wonderful some of the things God has done for us are. And what I would like to do is encourage you, because this man right here had his sight restored, and he is just stunned that people who see it, know it, and accept what happened, but can't accept why and how. They just cannot accept the fact that Jesus did it. In fact, a little later on, as he makes the comment, if this man, in verse 33, if this man were not from God, he could do nothing. This is like, common sense, and yet such a marvelous thing has gone under the radar. Why is that? Well, I think there's several reasons. One, I think we're myopic. We see just right here, and that's all we see. Can't see the forest for the trees. It's not a new problem. It's had that effect very often. Just a little further over in John, we find that the spiritual leaders of that day had this issue. They weren't looking at the big picture. All they were looking at is who we are and where we are right now. Look at with me, John 11, 47 through 50. And this morning I'm going to be reading several little passages that you can follow along with me if you'd like. John 11, 47 through 50. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what shall we do? For this man works many signs. You couldn't deny what was happening. So it was a problem for them because they did not want to accept who Jesus is to be able to do that. And so they say, if we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him. Oh, God forbid that should happen. Everyone will believe him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and nation. We're worried about where we are right now, and because we're so worried about right now, we can't see past the end of our nose to take care of something long term. You know, that is our culture's issue today. We're an instant gratification culture. We're all about right now. And that's why we've got credit card debt, and that's why we've got a deficit nationally, and that's why, well, it's just tons of other problems we have, because we're out for a pleasure for right now. We don't look at the big picture. I think sometimes the marvelous things God has done goes as an oversight because all we're worried about is me, right now, right now, right now. And so a little further on, he says, if you let him alone, this is going to happen. And one of them, Caiaphas, being high priest for that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people and not that the whole nation should perish. Wow, what a mind-blowing fix for a problem. We can't deny what he's doing, but since we want to deny who he is, let's just kill him. You know what's hilarious about this, if it were not so sad, is this is John 12 we're reading from. Remember John 11? And what happened in John 11? Jesus was told, Lazarus, your buddy's sick. And Jesus said, okay, we're going to hang out for a few days and then we'll go over there. And sure enough, he died. And so he goes over there and he raises Lazarus from the dead. And lo and behold, what do they try to do? Well, they're going to try to kill Jesus, but they're also going to try to kill Lazarus also. In chapter 12, verse 10, but the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death also. It would be funny if it weren't so sad. Look, Lazarus died once and Jesus raised him. What's your killing him going to do? He can raise him again? That's just not thinking. It's because all they were worried about is going on right now. Sometimes we miss the marvelous nature of what God has done for us because all we're worried about is me right now. And it's something we can look at and be honest about. Perhaps, too, hand in hand with that is the idea of thinking shallow. The shallow kind of thinking, I think, has to do with not getting the abstract thought that is, again, the bigger picture than just the physical nature of things. I mean, that has been a problem with humanity forever and ever. It's a problem today. Understanding, in fact, you know, it's the same old deal where some kid tells a gal, I love you. Well, no, what he's after is he lusts her is what it comes to. Love is something much more deep than that, and it's expressed in multitudes of ways. However, love is an abstract thought. And it's one of those that's very high and very lofty, and you know that to be the case when God says, I am love. That's a term that defines who God is. Notice with me in Mark the 8th chapter, beginning in the 15th verse. Mark 8:15, and this is where his disciples, not quite getting it yet, and he's got this learning curve going with his disciples. They are still thinking the here and now, but also the physical. And I guess that's why in many religions there are so many trinkets and so many objects and so many things to which people look as though there's some power in that piece of metal or that statue or whatever the case may be. Whereas in this particular text here, Jesus is teaching his disciples and he tells them, he charges them saying in verse 15, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Now this is right after a massive event where Jesus fed thousands and then took up baskets and basket loads of leftovers after the feast. And he did it all with just a few fishes and a couple of loaves of bread. And so he gets in the boat, and so what was their mind gravitate to naturally? Well, the physical. They reasoned among themselves, it is because we have no bread. Here again, Jesus is trying to get us to a level a little bit higher than just the physical and say, no, don't just think about this down here. Think about the big picture. And so therefore, Jesus was aware of it and he said to them, why do you reason because you have no bread? Why are you doing that? Do you not perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened? By the way, those are definitions we can use elsewhere in the text. Having eyes, do you not see? Having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke 5 loaves for the 5,000 and how many baskets full of fragments was taken up? And they go, well, yeah, I remember verse 12. I don't know if they still got it. The idea that, don't you realize I'm not talking about physical bread? He said also, when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up? Well, yeah, we remember the number. There were 7 of them. What's the point? How is it you do not understand? In another context, they finally got it. Oh, he's not talking about bread. He's talking about the teaching. I think a lot of people miss the massive marvelousness of God because they are so shallow in their thinking. To think that some trinket carries some magical value. I'm sorry, that's not the case. No, our connection with God is a relational connection. It doesn't have to do physically with something. In fact, I would encourage members of the church to absorb that, because I appreciate so much everyone being here this morning. Your presence here is encouraging. Your ability to be here and hear God's word is going to be good, I hope, to edify you, to make you become better. But this meeting in this building, which is not sacred, is not the whole totality of your Christianity. This is for edification, for encouragement, so that you go out of these walls and be the Christian you should be. We need to think on a higher level, and I think shallow thinking sometimes causes us problems with seeing some of the things God has done that is so marvelous. I think apathy and distraction is also another problem. And Jesus warned about that in Luke. If you'll look in Luke 14, 18 through 20. In Luke 14, 18 through 20, he's talking about the Great Supper that Jesus is inviting everybody to. And by that, talking about that, we need to be there when he invites us to his Great Supper. These are all lofty concepts of becoming God's children and being there to feast on his word. Jesus would say in John 6 and verse 60, somewhere in that neighborhood in the 60s, you have to imbibe me. You have to make a meal out of me. And so what Jesus is telling them, I'm inviting you to this supper. And so when he invites a bunch of them to this Great Supper, then in verse 18, here are the excuses that people give. But they all with one accord began to make excuses. The first said, I have bought a piece of ground, and I must go and see it, and I ask that you have me excused. Now, I don't mean to be pejorative or biased or bigoted, but this is a context in which Jesus is teaching a Jewish people. And if you're familiar with Jews and the way they were understood by everyone, including themselves, not one single Jew on the planet would buy a property without having seen it. Now, I realize maybe Bill Gates does on occasion because, you know, he got money, or Soros or some of these other guys. But you're not going to buy a property unless you go see it. That was a lame excuse. The next one says, well, I bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to test them, and please excuse me. You're going to go test a bunch of oxen you bought that you haven't tested yet. You know, in Austin, there is this business, Carvana. I don't know whether you're familiar with it. They advertise a lot. Where you can just order your car online. And you know what the selling feature of that entire company is? The return policy. You know why? Because when you buy something just plain old out of pictures, and then you see it for real, it's like, that's not what I ordered. And their return policy is great. That's what keeps them in business. Folks, we don't buy cars by and large unless we see them, test drive them, especially when you're talking about something used. You'll notice the next one, this tickles me. Still another said, I'm married a wife and therefore I cannot come. See, guys, for ages we've been blaming our wife for not doing the right thing. It doesn't work then. It didn't work then. It doesn't work now. Okay? All of these excuses are basically just saying, I don't really want to do what I need to do. The last one I look at is those who are tradition bound. And that's the one that goes back to our text, our home text in John 9:32. I mean, nobody's ever seen anything like this. And I know a lot of people are like that. You know, if I've never seen that, well, it can't be. And if I can't explain it, then it can't be explained. In fact, I have discovered in my short career as a preacher, when I talk to people about miracles, and they start defining anything and everything as miracle, really what it comes down to is that I can't explain it. If I can't explain it, it must be a miracle. Now, I hate to say this, and I'm trying to be as kind as I can, but what an incredibly arrogant position to take. That if I'm not smart enough to figure it out, or if I have not already known it or experienced it, then it's not possible that it can be something I don't understand or don't know. It must be a miracle. And that's not the case. In fact, as I have grown older, I have become more and more under the realization I'm incredibly ignorant. I can't speak for you, but the more I know, the less I know that I know. Because there is so much information out there. It is kind of a tough position to take, as the Jewish folks did here who were leaders. Now, it's never been done before. John 9:32, since the world began, this man is telling them. And you know he's just a little peon guy. He's not somebody. He says, since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. And you know that was a sticking point for these guys because, oh, we've never seen this before. This can't be. Folks, it's an arrogant position to take that. The tradition, we've always done it that way, is an arrogant position. Because just because we've always done it that way doesn't make it right. If we've always done it that way because God said to do it that way, then God is the one who is in charge of the authority. It is amazing to me that people can overlook the obvious. They quit marveling. They quit looking at things that God has done from that state of being totally and completely impressed. And part of that's a bit of arrogance. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. I can't speak for you, but I know Jeff. And Jeff tries hard. But the reason Jeff's nose doesn't stick out this far is because he falls on it regularly. I can't speak for y'all, but I make mistakes. And what baffles me, what humbles me, is that God would love me so much, He would send His Son to die for me. Now, I know He dies for the whole world. I know that. And I'm concerned for the whole world. But frankly, as I've said many times before, I'm not going to hell for anybody. I'm going to heaven because I'm going to do what God said. And that being the case, I am stunned and I marvel that God would value me and send His Son for me. Now you take that any way you need to take that. You understand that the best you can. And I'll just emphasize the fact that because I have sinned, I deserve hell. That's what I deserve. But because He gave His Son, Jesus, I don't have to worry about it. God will take care of me because He loves me and has provided for me an easy way to fix the sin issue. All I have to do is just marvel that He loved me so much. Now, on the other side of the coin, just to be clear, God did all that for all of us. And if you refuse, I don't want to stand in your shoes when it comes to judgment. To have to explain to Jesus at judgment, yeah, you did all this, you died for me, and that's the expression of God's love, just overwhelming, and maybe I didn't appreciate it as much as I should, but you know, I didn't do a thing you said to do. I don't know how you're going to explain that. Well, I know you're not. It can't be done. And there will be great fear and a reckoning. Because look at what God's done for us. Is it not marvelous? Is it not amazing? How does that escape someone? I hope it doesn't escape us. Those of us who are members of the Lord's body. How much God has loved us and allowed us to be here this morning. To enjoy each other's company. To lift each other up. To help us be better so we go out in the community and help others go to heaven. That's our job. That's what we do. That's who we are. If you're not a member, if you would only realize how marvelous it is to be loved by God and respond accordingly. We always do that in the invitation song. Give you an opportunity to respond. If you don't respond to the invitation song, though, the invitation is always open. Please respond. Don't leave life today not ready to look at God and say, it's just marvelous that you love me. And hear, well done, good and faithful servant. If you want to respond, we offer you the invitation in song as we sing.